Congressman Crist, as we begin this interview, the timing is fortuitous. Your first TV ad is up. It's called Fighting Back, and it talks quite a bit about all the things that Ron DeSantis has done as governor that you oppose. We don't see any mention in that ad of your Democratic primary opponent, Nikki Fried. And so my question is it possible, Congressman, that you're taking your Democratic opponent too lightly here?
No, I never do that in any campaign I've ever been in. I feel good about where we are in the primary, to just be candid. I'm confident, but not complacent. She's a formidable opponent. I have respect for her, and I look forward to August 23rd. And God willing, that'll go well. And I look forward to taking on this person we have in the governor's office now.
We in the media, and I think people in politics, have gotten to the point where we're extremely wary about polls. And the polls that we've seen recently in this race are all over the place. How close is this race? I'm talking about the Democratic primary from where you stand.
Well, we did an internal poll that we released not long ago. It shows us up 21. I'm fairly confident in those numbers, but you're right. I mean, listen, I think all of us have had our confidence shaken in the polling industry. I certainly have. And so, I mean, it's all over the place, but I do feel good about where we are.
It's been 11 years since you left the governor's office in 2011. 11 years is a very long time in Florida. We're a dynamic state with a rapidly changing and growing electorate. I don't have the numbers, but I venture to say that many people who will be voting in this Democratic primary on August 23rd either didn't live in the state or don't remember perhaps voting for you when you were governor. That gives you a chance to reintroduce yourself to the electorate. And I want to ask you, what is it about former Governor Charlie Crist that you would like voters to remember?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I hope they remember that I'm a decent person and somebody who pretty much stays calm most of the time. You know me, Steve. I mean, I don't get angry. I get frustrated sometimes. And two things that really do frustrate me will be arrogance and unfairness. And I see both in this current governor. And it's very frustrating, and it breaks my heart. I mean, I'm running for governor because I love Florida. And I have a deep sense of obligation to my fellow Floridians. It's another reason I'm running, to be candid. I know it's going to take a lot to beat this guy. And having been governor before, I think is a real leg up. Having been your attorney general and fought for civil rights, I think is a huge help. And I think being commissioner of education is a help. In the past 6 years in Congress, I've grown as well. And I've met a lot of people around the country, a lot of very smart, dedicated people. And we have a great president, in my opinion, in Joe Biden, who cares deeply about democracy. Democracy is at stake in this election. And I appreciate that. And I look forward to meeting new Floridians. I think there's about 1,000 new people come to the Sunshine State every day on average. And that's why I move around the state as much as I do. I mean, from Key West to Pensacola, from here in Jacksonville today, down to Naples and all over the state. And they have the right to meet me in person as much as I can do that. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay. I've got one more question in this little first round, and it's this. You've got a very, very long body of work and track record as a former Republican governor. And it's many of the things you did as governor are strikingly at odds with the Charlie Crist we know today. My question is this. Tell us some things that you would undo as a Democratic governor that you did as a Republican governor.
That's tough. You got to remember, when I was a Republican governor, I'm the guy who appointed the last African-American to the Florida Supreme Court. Justice Perry. I also restored automatic restoration of rights, and 155,000 returning citizens got their rights restored in my first administration in just 4 years. That's a trickle today. And as my good friend Mike Hamby used to always tell me, Charlie, you're a Democrat, you just don't know it. And to be honest, Steve, I mean, I was a Republican because mom and dad were. It's the same reason I'm a Methodist. Mom and dad are. And the older I got and the more I saw in politics in America, as your governor and working with President Obama, frankly, to get through the Great Recession, the event that I attended with him in Fort Myers, Florida, and introduced him and hugged him, and then worked with him again in the BP oil spill to save, our beautiful Florida and our environment. Those things opened my eyes to a lot of things that really started to disappoint me about some in my former party. I don't want to paint too broad a brush here. They're good Republicans still, and I believe that. But I also believe that the leadership of the Republican Party is gone. And I think even Jeb Bush said once that if Ronald Reagan and his father were up for the nomination in the Republican Party of today, and this was probably at least 5 years ago, they wouldn't have a chance. And I think that Governor Bush was right when he said that. And I saw it. I really couldn't stomach what was happening in my former party. It started with the rise of the Tea Party, and now it's just metastasized, particularly after the Trump presidency. And so I'm excited to be a Florida Democrat.
All right. Let me cite an example of something. My question was, what would you undo that you did as governor? You signed a law in 2008 or 2009 that repealed a mandatory inspection regimen for condominiums every 5 years. It's an issue your opponent has talked about in this campaign. Was that a mistake?
Yeah, hindsight's 2020 for sure. Yeah, and that's what life is. When you gain wisdom, ultimately, hopefully, when you have a decent amount of intellect and a good amount of experience, and you merge the two, I think you gain wisdom. And certainly I have. I hope all of us have on this call. I mean, that's what life is supposed to be. And I certainly have. I've learned from those mistakes. And you regret some things like that. But in hindsight, when you see what's happening and what has happened, particularly at Sunrise, the Surfside, then you need to adjust. And I'm not afraid to adjust. Some people are. They'll be stuck in the sand and they won't move because they think it's wrong or something. I don't. I have flexibility and the ability to change when change is required.
The floor is open, and let's start with Chris Fluker. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi. Well, I actually wanted to also revisit something that happened during your first term as governor and as attorney general. For several years, almost 6 years, the state fought with a South Florida man who was trying to adopt two young brothers who had been badly abused. By 2008, the state has spent, according to one of our columnists, more than $250,000 fighting this man's desire to adopt these two young men. And it wasn't until 2010 that the state stopped, after he had won at the 3rd District Court of Appeals, and which finally eradicated Florida's ban on gay adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at that, do you think that that was a wise decision to keep fighting that case so long? And I'm asking that because I have a follow-up.
Sure. Well, I was the one who dropped the case.
Mm-hmm.
So if you judge me by how I ultimately came down, I think I got it right. Maybe it took a little longer than it should have, Chris, candidly.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully you get to the right place ultimately. And I think that I did. And I'm glad it ended up where it did, where I dropped the suit.
And the reason I bring that up is because one of the things that you said and that George Sheldon also said was that you were obligated to defend the law. Well, the next governor is going to take office just as a bunch of laws are really taking hold of the state,
right,
particularly the school system, that many have said are unconstitutional. The Stop Woke Act, the Don't Say Gay legislation. How are you going to handle the duty to defend some of this legislation? And I understand that this is a decision that's usually made jointly with the Attorney General, but I want to know how you feel the state should handle some of some of these laws, and which ones would give you heartburn defending?
Well, the two you mentioned certainly give me heartburn. I think they're ridiculous. I think they're unconstitutional. I think that they're unconscionable. I think they're immoral. And I think that, anything I could do as governor to stop them, it's an all hands on deck approach as far as I'm concerned and where my heart is, because these kinds of laws are designed to have culture wars be part of the DeSantis resume for 24. Let's be honest about this, okay? And I know it. We all know it. And they're not Florida. And I don't think they reflect what most Floridians believe. Most Floridians are good, decent people. So I will sign executive orders. I will work with the legislature. I am confident of this too, Chris. I believe in my heart that there are Republicans in the Florida legislature today, moderate ones. Jeff Brandes comes to mind. I wish he wasn't termed, but that are being suppressed also, like about a lot of other Floridians are, and a lot of universities are. I mean, I saw the story in the Orlando Sentinel today about what's happening at UCF, about anti-racial or discriminatory language, and they're going to take it down. We all saw what happened at the University of Florida and how this governor and his administration, through the board of trustees at UF, tried to, really censor the university system. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in America. I've certainly not seen it in Florida. And so anything and everything I can do, go to court, sign executive orders, try to just get the legislation repealed with the help of some of the moderate Republicans and the Democrats that get elected. I think we need to do everything we can to get Florida back to being sane again, because it's crazy right now.
Congressman, I had sort of a follow-up to that. You mentioned doing everything in your power to stop these laws and to reverse these laws. The powers of the governor and the governor's office have changed a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, and they've obviously wavered back and forth over time. What do you think the next governor, whether it's you, regardless of any party, what do you think the next governor should do in terms of maybe regulating the powers of the office?
Well, I think it really, most of the credit for the Florida governor becoming a stronger governor goes to Jeb Bush. I mean, he changed that significantly, and it has continued to change, Jay. I don't disagree with you. And that's why it's so important we elect a good person. I mean, I'm not being trite when I say this, that, these elections really matter, and democracy is at stake in this election. And Florida sets the tone for the country. And the outcome of this election is going to have a significant impact on 2024. I think we all recognize that. We're still a swing state, in my view. I mean, we're about a third Republican, about a third Democrat, and about a third and growing independent. And that's probably the most important stat with the registration issue that we hear about, is that independents are growing faster and faster. And so I think who Floridians elect as governor, whether it's Nikki or myself or Ron DeSantis, is critical going forward for the future of our state and the future of our country. And so, whoever gets elected, if it's me, I'll exercise those powers carefully, cautiously, with, I hope, wisdom and good advice and counsel. I'm the kind of person who doesn't think I know it all. I think I know a lot, but I am humble enough to understand that there's a lot of smart people you can have around you. I strive to do that, whether I'm in office or in a campaign, and I'm doing it with both. And I feel blessed to have the people around me that I do, that I think are very smart and care a great deal about people, real people.
Go further back and have probably had more offices than anybody I can think of, except perhaps Bob Butterworth. Looking back on your entire career, all the way back to the legislature, what are the things, the accomplishments you're proudest of, and what do you most regret?
I think the thing I'm proudest of, probably two things. One goes back to being a state senator, frankly, and an issue that's super hot right now, a woman's right to choose. I was a freshman senator from St. Pete, Tampa Bay, actually, and there was on the health committee, an issue came up, Martin, about a woman's right to choose and a 24-hour waiting period. I voted against that legislation that was offered by a pretty conservative Republican from the Panhandle. And as a result of me voting no, it never went to the Senate floor. It died in committee on a 3-3 vote because I voted no. I'm very proud of that. The other thing I'm really proud about is the restoration of rights. I believe in fairness, fundamental fairness and justice and equal rights. And I believe we're all children of God and need and deserve to be treated equally. And having restoration of rights and the notion of forgiveness front and center in Florida, I'm very proud that we were able to do that. Now, Chris pointed out something that was regretful as it relates to condominiums. Had that to do over and know what I know now, I would have gone on a different course. But I do know what I know now. And so I would be able to do that. And I advocate for that in this campaign, more inspections. I mean, I lived since 1983 in a condominium in downtown St. Pete. So that issue is not lost on me at all. And Bayfront Tower was not that far from the water, as you know. So I'm very sympathetic to that. And I don't want other Floridians to suffer what happened in South Florida.
Good morning, Congressman.
Morning,
I
Scott.
believe you have traditionally supported the death penalty. In fact, if memory serves, you were the governor who signed a warrant to resume Florida executions after Jeb Bush had paused them when some problems occurred. Can you tell us, are you still a proponent of the death penalty, and tell us why? Thanks.
Proponent might be the wrong word. I support the law. And there are times when it's appropriate. And what I've told people many times when asked, what's the hardest thing you ever had to do as governor? It's sign a death warrant. Because but for that signature, that person's not going to die. Think about that weighing on your shoulders. And the only way that I was able to do it when I was sitting at my desk in the governor's office was to put the faces of the victims on my desk. Literally, I would do that. And it made it not easy for me to sign it, but it gave me more empathy for the victims and what had happened to them. But I do support the law. I do support the death penalty.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about a different topic, and that is school choice. I think historically you have been a proponent of that. The Orlando Sentinel has written a lot over the years about the voucher system in Florida, or also called the scholarship system, particularly about the lack of accountability and transparency for how those schools are run and what basically taxpayers are getting for their money. Where do you stand now on school choice and specifically vouchers, and any changes you'd like to see to the system?
Well, I think you're right and dead on right. Greater accountability is absolutely appropriate here. Listen, we judge our public schools, from A to Z, and we should. That's appropriate. But I think it's also appropriate if we're getting taxpayers' money, to some private schools or some charter schools, which is happening in large measure in Florida, then they need to be equally accountable as our public schools are to those children. I don't want to close off opportunities for children to get a good education in Florida. But what I do want to do is make sure that our public schools are funded properly. I'm pretty sure that when I was governor under a $70 or so billion budget compared to Ron DeSantis's $110 billion budget, we spent more per student, and we certainly did better with teacher salaries. I mean, we're the third largest state in the country, Scott, and right now our teachers are being paid 49th out of 50 or 48th, depending on which survey you look at. It's embarrassing either way. It needs to be better. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the FEA in this campaign, and the American Federation of Teachers as well. And I'm going to fight for our teachers, because fighting for our teachers means you're fighting for those kids. And they deserve it, and they deserve to have a governor who really does care about them and isn't trying to make a bunch of money for people in other businesses.
Congressman, I watched, and a lot of us watched, a recent lengthy interview you did with WPTV Channel 5 in West Palm Beach, Shannon Cake, the anchor there. And that was one of several interviews we've seen where you described yourself as both pro-life and pro-choice. I think I know what you meant, but like the interviewer, I have to say that pro-life, the term pro-life, is strongly identified with an opposition to abortion. So help us understand how you can be pro-life and pro-choice.
Well, you know that I said I was for life, right? Right? And so what I mean by that, Steve, is I think that, the Republican Party is very clever at using terms in a very political way and weaponizing those terms. And so, utilizing the term pro-life, what's the flip side of that? Pro-death? I mean, it's clever. that they do that. But, you know, I am pro-choice. I was raised with three sisters. I'm an only son. I've always been, you know, with my votes, with my actions, with my vetoes as your governor, pro-choice. I'm the only candidate in this race, for crying out loud, who actually already, as a governor of Florida, has vetoed an anti-abortion bill. I have a 100% rating by NARAL and Planned Parenthood as a member of the United States Congress. And as I pointed out earlier, as a state senator, I killed an anti-abortion bill in the state Senate. So my record is crystal clear. I mean, every act, every deed I've done on this issue has been pro-choice, pro-choice, pro-choice. So I think it's pretty clear where I am. And that's that.
I've got a question on a different topic completely. If you're elected governor in November, what happens to the new Office of Election Crimes and Security that Ron DeSantis created in the Department of State?
You know, that's mind-blowing to me, isn't it? It goes away, number one. I mean, to me, that's ludicrous. I don't understand why, except trying to intimidate voters, he's doing that. And I think that's why he's doing that. I mean, you know, when people come up to go, if they vote on election day, and they see law enforcement officers around, what kind of message does that send to a potential voter, especially if you perhaps are a minority? It's intimidation. It's suppression. That's the intent of it. I'm certain of it. And so I would do everything to eradicate it.
Okay. And on that same subject, since I'm sure this is somebody you know well and have dealt with, maybe in the Attorney General's office and elsewhere, but Governor DeSantis' choice of Pete Antonacci to run that division. What is your opinion about him as the appointee there?
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. And I know Pete, and I know when he worked with General Butterworth, I admired his work. But subsequent to that, I've been disappointed in his public service.
Congressman, if you were to prevail in November, you still face likely a Republican legislature that may even further restrict women's rights, right to an abortion. What would you do specifically to expand or protect women's rights?
Well, if they attempt to expand the limitations, I'd veto it. But I would try to work with them before that might occur. You know, I think that if let's say DeSantis loses and in a lame duck posture, as governor, calls the legislature back in to try to resurrect his career or whatever for 24, you know, they pass an outright ban on abortion. Well, before I even got sworn in, I would mount a campaign to have a statewide initiative as a constitutional amendment and gather signatures that would reverse the ban and protect a woman's right to choose. As I said earlier, every single thing imaginable I can do to protect a woman's right to choose, I will do. I have done it, and I'll do it again.
Completely different topic. What would be the tops of your list on your environmental agenda, your environmental priorities?
Well, we've got a mess with our water right now. And as a member of Congress, I've gotten millions of dollars as a member of the Appropriations Committee to try to stem the tide of these algae blooms that we suffer from on both coasts. You know, we had the worst red tide I've ever seen in Tampa Bay last summer. And I've lived in Tampa Bay since 1960. And I've never seen more dead fish on the bay than I did last summer. I participated in a protest in downtown St. Pete near the pier, the purpose of which was to try to encourage Governor DeSantis to declare a state of emergency to help St. Pete and Tampa clean up Tampa Bay. He wouldn't do it, which I don't understand. But so water is a huge issue. What's happening in the Everglades and Lake Okeechobee is a mess. You know, as you probably recall, I tried during the Great Recession to get significant amount of land purchased by the state from U.S. Sugar in order to restore the natural flow of the water south into Lake Okeechobee, therefore into the Everglades, then into Florida Bay, which I think would significantly help clean up our water. But we have to cut back, I think, on the use of septic tanks, or at least make them more efficient and better. I think we also need to reduce the amount of fertilizer that's utilized in the agricultural area to a reasonable amount, so that we don't have these blooms that go into the Caloosahatchee River on the west coast, the St. Lucie River on the east coast, And you have this problem every single year. And look, I understand red tide is sort of a natural thing that happens, but it's on steroids because of the way we're treating it in Florida, or mistreating it, I should say. And I think that we would have to have a Department of Environmental Protection that actually has a scientist as the secretary. And we got to refund the DEP to make sure they have the opportunity to get their job done and done right to protect Florida, or we're going to lose her. I mean, you know, people come here because she's beautiful. Tourism's important to our state. And I say this so often, it nauseates Steve Bosquet, but I always say that the environment and the economy in Florida are inextricably linked from my perspective. And if we don't continue to try to protect our land and our water and do our duty as good stewards of the land and water in Florida, we're going to crush our tourist industry. And this governor's trying to do it with Walt Disney World, for crying out loud. I mean, it's just, the list is almost too long of the bad things that this guy has done to our beautiful state.
I'd like to return to the death penalty for a minute. As far as I can tell, the last governor who actually held a hearing on a pending death warrant was Jeb Bush. Attorneys who represent death row inmates say they can't even get answers when they file last-minute petitions for clemency. As governor, would you restore the practice of having a hearing, a public hearing, on an inmate's application for clemency when it's requested?
Well, where I think it's warranted, of course. I mean, that's what justice is supposed to be all about. Give people their day in court, if you will. And certainly if I thought there were a case that warranted that, I absolutely would do so, Martin.
Well, the reason it's all the more important for now is because in a recent and very controversial decision, the Supreme Court abandoned its commitment to conduct proportionality review, which means that the governor is now the only person remaining in the system to try to look at all these penalties and see whether they're justified or not. Now, you said a minute ago when you thought it was warranted, but what decides whether an inmate's request warrants a hearing or not?
Well, every case stands on its own facts, Martin. I know that as an attorney. I know that as your attorney general before, and I try to weigh them very carefully. And if I believe that there is a scintilla of evidence that indicates that it needs to be reviewed and a full hearing should be had, I will do so. And you can count on that.
Congressman, you appointed Charlie Kennedy Jr. and Ricky Polston to the Florida Supreme Court, two of the court's most conservative members. And do they exemplify the sort of values and philosophy that you would look for if you were governor and were to appoint another justice?
Well, maybe in a specific issue, they probably don't. Generally, I think both men are men of integrity, or I wouldn't have appointed them. I think they have a keen intellect, and I think they're very serious people. But I have been disappointed by some of their rulings as it relates to choice in particular. And I'm not going to vote for their retention, and I would recommend others not.
What about the other justices who are also up for a retention vote this time?
Well, the bar guy I love. I think he's great. The others, I'd have to review their record, but I have had the opportunity to review the two that you mentioned because I sort of anticipated that might come up this morning.
I'd like to follow up because you confused me a little bit with that. You would vote against their retention, but you do not regret appointing them?
Well, I regret it as it relates to the issue we're talking about, Scott.
Okay.
I'm an honest man, okay, and humble enough to say it.
But let's stay on this just for a second. There has never been a case in Florida history where the voters have removed a judge in a merit retention vote. We've had a couple of close calls, but it's never happened.
Right.
You're asking, just so we're clear, you are asking the voters of Florida to remove from the Florida Supreme Court two justices you appointed. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, you heard it correctly. I mean, they've made rulings since I appointed them. This probably happens to U.S. presidents. It probably happens to other governors. I mean, you think you know somebody until they start making rulings, and then maybe you don't know them as well as you thought or that you had hoped you did.
When the nominating system was created, it was set up so that the governor could appoint only 3 members of each 9-member commission, and he did not control them. Would you, as governor, press to reinstate the system as Governor Askew about established it.
Yes, I would, Martin. I mean, I think that was the right approach. You have to have balanced all these things, and checks and balances are important in our system of government. What we see in the current governor is an autocrat. I'm a Democrat running to protect democracy. He's an autocrat trying to create a dictatorship. And I think I find it appalling. He's telling school boards what to do, mayors what to do, preemption laws, telling University of Florida and Central Florida how they can speak, to try to give philosophical backgrounds to the people that are teaching at those universities. It's insane. I mean, this is not America.
One of the hardest segments of voters to reach and to understand has been the younger voters, millennials, and younger than that. But when you look at places like Reddit and TikTok, you get a lot of criticism aimed at you saying that you're still just a Republican and are going to go do Republican things, and that they don't trust you because you have switched parties. And I wanted to ask, how do you reach those voters and kind of introduce yourself to them and convince them that this is you just as it was you 20 years ago?
I think they have a right to their opinion, of course. Let me acknowledge that. I respectfully disagree with it. I think that how you reach younger voters is you go meet with them. I mean, I've probably been to 10 universities already during the course of this campaign alone. And I'm going to continue to do that and reach out to young voters. And if you can trust polling, our topic we touched on earlier, I'm doing pretty well among younger voters because I actually think I reflect their idealism. And I've been an idealist my entire political career and a hopeful person. And I see that in young people. And I still have that in my heart. And I think that we're going to get the lion's share of their vote come August and November.
And I did want to follow up on that. One of the things that seemed to make a big difference is when you got endorsements from people like Anna Eskamani. How do you capitalize on those connections to kind of put your message across to a wider expanse of voters?
Campaign with her. She's on the short list as a potential running mate for my campaign. And, and I think that's important. I have great respect for her. She's incredibly bright. And the thing that she said about my campaign and about me personally that really was most gratifying is that she said, I trust Charlie Crist. You can trust Charlie Crist. He's going to do what's right on these issues that we care deeply about.
I've got a related question about that, Congressman. I was with you recently and watched you work a room in the city of Tamarack with older Democrats. You went to a Haitian American community function in the city of North Lauderdale last weekend in Broward County. You are still in an age when there's less and less retail campaigning in Florida. You're still doing it. But my question is, let's take the Haitian American community event last Sunday. What do you draw from events like that? What do you learn that you wouldn't learn unless you showed up at those events?
Oh, gosh. Well, what they care about, it's what you learn from anybody that you're face to face with. And one of the things that I think is unfortunate, I mean, technology can be great and technology can be not great, right? And so when you communicate via email or a text, a lot is lost in translation. And you don't get to look the person in the eye. And you know me, Steve, I frankly, I love people. I love hearing their stories. I want to know where their concerns are and what they would like their future governor to do for them, and understand that, this person that's running, Charlie Crist, views himself not as a politician, but a public servant, hopefully with a servant's heart. And the best way I think I can communicate that to people is to be with them in person and, look them in the eye and show them how much I care by listening twice as much as I talk. It takes a lot of patience to listen, but it's very important to do it. And by listening to people, whether it's in the Haitian community or anywhere in the state, I think being there in person as much as I can is important. It's important to me. You know, I get a real sense of genuineness when I'm able to be with somebody in person, much more so than maybe even on a Zoom call, but certainly more than a text message or an email. And so it's important to me because I'm trying to gauge what really is hurting people and causing them suffering. And I know in our economy in Florida today, a lot of them are suffering badly.
Speaking of which, very briefly, a lot of people are suffering badly with homeowners insurance. They've either had their policies canceled or they've seen their premiums double and triple. What solution, what changes are needed in homeowners insurance in Florida?
Well, we need to lower the rates. I mean, you know, you and I have been through this. You know, when I got elected the first time, the first special session I called was on property insurance because it was a nightmare at the time. It had been let go out of control. It was virtually unregulated under my predecessor. And that's the case right now, only I think it's worse. And so I think we need to make sure that we have an insurance commissioner that takes the job seriously. It isn't just some kind of lapdog, just like the PSC is now a lapdog. Instead of being the watchdog they were designed to be for utilities. I mean, you know, that stuff's a mess. It's a joke. And it's those utilities and those insurance companies that funnel huge campaign contributions to the Republicans and to DeSantis in particular, because he will let them do whatever they want and run wild. And, you know, I mean, they get great breaks from this governor. I think it was Jason Garcia did a great piece yesterday about how, you know, Florida consumers have been stuck with 1.5 billion in more taxes, while large corporations in Florida have benefited from about 5.6 billion in tax reductions and giveaways. It's out of control. It's out of control. They are beholden to those people.
Congressman, I went back and read some of the columns I had written back during your first term. And one of the things I was reminded was that you were pretty popular for a lot of that when you were governor the first time, and even had some pretty strong or at least decent reviews from Democrats back then, which certainly isn't the case now. But I think some people started having questions after you started traveling out of state more, and reports that you were interested in seeking higher or at least different offices. And I guess I'm just wondering, do you think you made a mistake walking away from the governor's office the first time, or at least deciding not to seek a second term?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I saw what was going on, Scott, with the economy in Florida and in the country. And we were in the Great Recession and there was nothing great about it. But I understood where the money was coming from to save us. It was the federal government. And so I ran for the U.S. Senate so that I could have an opportunity, if I had been victorious, to make sure that Florida continued to get her fair share of those federal dollars, because I knew what they did for Florida when I was working with President Obama. It saved 20,000 teachers their jobs in Florida because of the Recovery Act. And I actively worked to make that pass at the request of the White House. I mean, I remember making calls to people like Susan Collins as a Republican at the time, encouraging them to cross over and vote for the president's plan, so that we wouldn't have to lay off 20,000 teachers, we wouldn't have to lay off law enforcement or firefighters. We could continue to be able to function even though we were in a struggled time. And I knew as a U.S. Senator, I would have more opportunity to do that as well. No, I don't regret the decision.
And I guess to follow that up on the flip side, now you are at the federal level, but you'd like to come back to the state, help maybe complete that circle of thinking for us.
Yeah, sure. Well, our state's being led by I'm going to try to be kind, a bad governor. And it breaks my heart because I know how good Florida is. I know most Floridians are good, decent people. They're not anti-gay. They're not anti-women's choice. They're not anti-African American. And having congressional districts like he redlined out essentially for Al Lawson and Val Demings. I mean, thank God she's going to be our next U.S. Senator. But you know what he has done to Florida, he's torn her apart. And I can't sit idly by as somebody who's been governor, been attorney general, elected 3 times statewide, and have that resume and that record of decency and not put my candidacy out there and get off the sideline and do something about it. That's why I'm running for governor. He needs to go down. And I think I'm the only person who can do it. I feel a duty to do it.
Congressman, getting back to the primary for a second.
Sure.
When you look at Commissioner Freed, what is the single legislative issue, if you could pick one, on which you divide most with the commissioner?
My understanding is that in the medical marijuana arena, there aren't a whole lot of minorities represented in people who are getting licenses and permits. That is disturbing to me. And you know, I don't think there's much difference between us in terms of, you know, philosophy or what we believe in or what we hope to accomplish. I just think I'm the guy who can win the race. and I think that's what most Democrats have come to the conclusion about, is that they want to win. You know, it's not a whole lot different from comparing Biden versus Trump, Crist versus DeSantis. I mean, you know, in the presidential in 2020, you had a pretty seasoned guy, decent experience, decent person, good heart, you know, running on the Democratic side, and you had a rookie president in Trump on the Republican side. We have a rookie governor in DeSantis. I mean, I've been governor longer than he has, you know, so I have more experience than he does. I think I'm a decent person. I think that I have a heart for the people of Florida, whether they're in Keystone Heights or Miami. And I know this state and I know the people. And I think that it's terribly important that we have an election that offers up that choice. And so Floridians can make their decision about what they want for the future of this beautiful state. And I think they're going to vote for me. I think I'm going to win.
To that, one of the very obvious David and Goliath issues going on with the general election, whichever of you advances, is that Ron DeSantis has more than $100 million that we know about. The last time I looked, it looked as though you had about $5 million.
Say that again. I couldn't hear.
I said the last time I looked, you had, well, I'll just say much less than that.
Yeah, that's true.
How did the Democrats? How does any Democrat compete in November?
Well, first and foremost,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish.
With that much money on the other side.
Yeah. Well, this is about people. Money's important. I'm not naive. I've done this a few times, right? So we've raised about 12 million so far. And cash on hand is probably now hovering around 6.5 or 7, whatever it is. At any rate, what I think is important to remember, and we all need to remember this, particularly Democrats who want a Democrat in the governorship, the People's House. The last Democratic nominee was charismatic and also very tragic, and I pray for him. But when he got the nomination and upset Gwen Graham, he had $10,000 left in the bank. But in September, October 18, he was able to raise close to $60 million. I'm going to do more than that if I am fortunate enough to win the nomination. I have every great confidence in that. Assurances from a lot of the national fundraisers in the Democratic Party and office holders once a nomination is secure. So I'm not concerned about it. I'm really not. I mean, I almost beat by less than a point Rick Scott, who outspent me enormously. And it was a terrible Democratic year, 2014. Still almost beat the guy. So this guy's worse. and that's hard to say, but it's true. And I think that, you know, the amount of enthusiasm about this race, because he clearly is a national figure, we all know that, but he's a national figure that is revered by a radical minority. And I know that. And I know Floridians. And this is not what they like. And they particularly don't like, you know, when he turns around at a press conferences and dresses down kids that are wearing masks just to protect their health. I mean, let me share one vignette about that. I was at a Muslim event in South Florida, in Miami, probably 2.5 months ago, right when the video of that incident went viral. It was viewed by over 12 million people. And a guy comes up to me at the reception time before the dinner that evening. And he said, "You're Charlie Crist." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I'm a lifelong Republican." And I'm like, "Oh God, here it comes." And he says, "And I'm going to vote for you." And he said, I can't believe what this governor did to those children. And they were children. And he said, he tried to put he talks about parental rights. He put himself in the shoes of the parents that day. And that was wrong. And so I'm not worried about the money. I think we'll have more than enough to compete. We're on television starting today, and we'll be on until the end.
2 answers ago, you mentioned the comparison between Trump, Biden, and you and DeSantis. And then just when you were talking to Chris Fluker just now, you brought up your race against Rick Scott. How is that not just as an apt a comparison? You're talking about another year where there's just as much of an anti-democratic year. There looks like, there's a big, could be a lot of Republicans winning office in 2022. Again, you have a massive amount of money being raised by your opponent. So rather than this being a Biden victory over Trump, how is it not a more apt comparison of your loss to Rick Scott? What makes it different this year?
This governor's worse than Scott. A lot.
But he has higher approval numbers amongst Republicans and amongst a lot of independents too than Rick Scott ever did. I mean, he was never a highly approved of governor.
Well, I just respectfully disagree with your assessment of the numbers, and we have that right. And I don't think it's going to be a bad Democratic year. I think you're wrong. And I'll point out 3 things to give evidence to. Roe versus Wade. That hasn't been an issue to the degree it is right now in 50 years. 50 years. It is now in this election year in 2022. And which party is more aligned with the right side of history on that? My party, the Democratic Party. Number 2, the gun issue and the massacres that we have suffered across this country and that Florida personally has suffered at Parkland, Pulse nightclub in Orlando. I mean, it's appalling what has happened. I'm running against a guy who, as a Republican candidate, wants to have open carry in spite of what's happening. I want to ban assault weapons. I want to have background checks that actually check backgrounds. I want to have red flag laws all over the country. I'm glad we have them to the degree we do here in Florida. And thirdly, the hearings that we're all riveted to whenever we watch them are amazing. So there is a trifecta of Democratic, I think, urgency around Roe, around guns, and around these hearings of saving democracy like we've never seen before. I am confident there's going to be an incredible turnout. Certainly that will be the case in Florida. And I hope with Val Demings and I at the top of the ticket, and the minority turnout will be great because of her, my wonderful colleague in Congress. So I think the future is bright. You know me as an optimist. I sure as hell am, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I have faith and I have confidence it's going to be a good year, and I think we're going to do well. And I think Val and I both will win these elections.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Anna Eskamani as a possible running mate, and one question ago with property insurance, you said we need a better insurance commissioner in there, somebody that really cares about the position. Could you give some examples of like who you would put in as insurance commissioner, or if you can't give examples of agency heads that you would nominate, at least some examples of people that have done the job well in the past that you would look to as the sort of person you would want in those positions?
Not offhand, I can't, no, but I know what I want. I want somebody who actually cares about the people. I was a consumer advocate as your attorney general, and I continue to be a consumer advocate as your governor. And I think it's important that we have somebody, particularly in that position, regulating the insurance industry, which I think is kind of a joke anyway. So this governor called a special session on property insurance, and he made it more difficult for consumers to get what the insurance company should pay them if they have a claim. That was their special session on property insurance. And they admitted they weren't lowering rates at all. This is the same guy who I recommended last November suspend the state gas tax, wouldn't do it, decided to do it during the session because he sees it as a good political issue, and goes totally political and says, okay, we'll do it for 1 month, October, right before you go vote. I mean, how stupid does he think Floridians are? And probably by the time October comes around, the price of gas is going to be as high as it is now anyway. I mean, we don't have a guy who cares about people at the top. If you want somebody who cares about people, vote for me.
what should the legislature have done to lower property insurance if the legislation they pass is not going to do it? What should they have done differently?
They should have done what I did when I called a special session. We lowered the rates by 10%. And why they don't come to the consumer's aid is beyond my comprehension, other than they get a lot of money from insurance companies. How do you think he's raising so much money? Okay.
Are you supportive of the steps that the Biden administration has taken with respect to our relationship with Cuba?
I think he's trying to do the right thing. Okay. And it's delicate. It's delicate, especially in Florida. And I think that he's making a good effort. I think some people are glad about it. Some people aren't. That's fairly typical on this issue. But I know he's trying hard.
I heard a story that from a Democratic activist in South Florida. I wanted to ask you about it. There was a story in the news about a month ago. Ron DeSantis has reserved, I think the number was like $5 million of airtime on Spanish language media in South Florida. And it's kind of early to be doing that. And that the speculation is that one of the reasons he did that is because he's going to make an issue out of the fact that you made a trip to Cuba as a member of Congress several years ago. There's a photograph of you with maybe a foreign minister, an official of the regime down there, and that presumably has some political advantage for him and a political disadvantage for you. Your record speaks for itself, but what about that visit, and what about that interaction you had in Cuba? What do people in Miami-Dade especially need to know about that?
Look, I think it's good to be well informed on every issue you can be. And I think traveling is an important component of that, especially when you're a member of Congress and you're dealing with foreign affairs. And so I just wanted to learn more, if I could, by being able to visit the island and see what it was like for myself. We all get a lot of reports about what it's like there. And I was disappointed by what I found there. I think the people are suffering. I'm glad that I was able to see it firsthand for myself and not have to rely on somebody else to give me that kind of information. And that's really that.
When we were setting up this exchange, this discussion, we tried very hard to get you to agree to appear with your primary opponent, Nikki Fried. You wouldn't. I know that you have some joint appearances, but very few. Why won't you appear jointly with her so that voters can see you side by side? I think a lot of people are wondering about that.
Well, I've already done it 8 times. We've had 8 forums already. Okay. I'm debating her. Pardon me?
They're hard to find when you look for video of those on the internet. So, I mean, I did find some, but yes, they're hard to find.
Okay. Nonetheless, I've done it, which I think is the question. And I'm going to be debating her again next week, a week from today. And I think that's sufficient. I'm trying to unite my party. I don't want to divide my party. I know that we can't win unless we're a united party. And let me say this now. If she wins on the evening of August 23rd, I will endorse her that night for governor of Florida. And I hope that she will do the same. Because I know that we have to band together in order to get rid of this governor. And I think it's imperative that we do that. I really do.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about talking about, as you did, the trifecta of democratic urgency. And I realized the primary is only round 1, and party primaries in midterm elections generally do not attract a very strong voter turnout in Florida, sadly, even when they're hotly contested. One of the things we look for is, or anyone would look for, is an avalanche of vote by mail requests by voters who want a ballot in the mail. And in the counties that I've spot checked, Congressman, I have not seen a huge surge in demand. It might be different in November, but can you tell us what you're seeing out there that either gives you optimism or cause for concern about a lack of enthusiasm among Democratic voters?
I don't sense that at all, Steve. With all due respect, I think that what we see, I mean, I've attended, I don't know how many protests about the Roe decision alone in the past couple of weeks, and not just Tampa Bay, but throughout the state. And I think there's a real palpable concern, urgency about Florida, about democracy, about the right to choose, about the gun slaughters happening around this country. You know, the legislation that passed Congress, I'm glad something happened, but it's not nearly enough. As I said earlier, I know we need to ban assault weapons. We need to have serious background checks. And we need to have red flag laws nationwide that are consistent in order to stem the tide of this. And I also see the reaction to the hearings that we're seeing, the January 6th hearings. They have been extraordinary and riveting and emotional. And I think all of those three are going to have a huge impact when it comes to the vote this fall. I'm confident of it.
What is it about the record of your opponent, Nikki Fried, that voters in Florida should know, Democratic voters, before they vote?
Well, I think I'm more experienced. You know, I think that's an important distinction to draw. And I think that experience really matters. You know, we're at a time in our state's history and our nation's history where democracy really is at stake. We almost lost it January the 6th. Let's be honest about this. And, you know, basically a coup was attempted by a sitting president of the United States of America. You know, I don't remember that ever happening. And it was close. I mean, I had colleagues that some people lost their lives that day. And I have colleagues that certainly could have. And another political colleague in Vice President Pence could have lost his life that day. So, you know, I think that, you know, there's a lot going on and we need to have good leadership. And I think we need it now more than ever in America, and certainly in the third largest state in America.
You made a comment very early on in this interview. You said something to the effect that, well, here it is. Democracy is at stake in this election and Florida sets the tone for the country. How does Florida set the tone for the other 49 states?
Let me put it this way. So we're the third largest state now. We passed New York several years ago, I guess. But, you know, when you look at New York, it's blue. You know, California, same way. Texas, pretty much red. And then there's us. And, you know, I know a lot of people want to say, well, it's red, it's red, it's red. It's not. It is not. And, or this governor who's in the governor's office now wouldn't have had the closest governor's race in the history of our state if that were the case. It's close in Florida. And I'm confident this will be close this year too. So, you know, I look forward to the campaign ahead. I think it's going to be exciting. And I know it's going to be more important than it is exciting.
Now that you've been a Democrat for a while, I wanted to ask you a question that we asked your opponent yesterday.
Yeah.
Because it's central to everything we're discussing here. And that is the demise of the Democratic Party and of Democrats being a strongly viable competitive force. You know, Nikki Fried likes to say that she's the only Democrat who's won a statewide election in like 12 years or whatever the number is. You ran against Bob Graham. You investigated Lawton Childs. You served alongside Jeb Bush. You ran against Rick Scott. I mean, nobody has a resume like that in Florida politics. But what, in your opinion, or who is responsible for the decline of the Democratic Party in the state?
I think we just need to get more active. I really do, and I see it happening. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I really see it happening, and I think I want to credit Val Demings and her candidacy. I think ours is doing it as well statewide. I think we're giving people hope. And I think that's important. And so I am looking and admiring the rise of the Florida Democratic Party right now. It's like a phoenix, and some people don't see it. But I think come November 8th, the world will see it.
We've heard from many economists are starting to kind of gather around the idea that we are likely to be facing a recession, possibly one that will put a lot of people in very perilous economic straits. And Florida has increased its minimum wage and will continue to do that. But, and what should the next governor be doing pretty much from day one to start getting ready for a state where the economy might be in free fall?
I think we are heading for a recession. I agree with that assessment. Now, in Florida, if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you're probably doing okay, right? But most of us aren't. So if you're trying to buy a house in Florida today, good luck. I mean, you got to be a millionaire or a billionaire to do that practically, or pay rent in Florida. And again, it's because this governor isn't focused on Florida. Florida's unaffordable. I think it was Forbes magazine about 3 weeks ago that said Florida is the most expensive state in America to live in, more than California, more than New York. And Miami's the most expensive city to live in America, in the most expensive state to live in America. Because this governor is focused on the White House more than your house. This governor doesn't care what you're having to pay at the pump right now. He doesn't feel the people's pain. He put it off, any relief, until October. He's done nothing to help housing. The Sadowski Fund has been raided in the state budget. He wouldn't do what I would do right now. I would reach out to my former colleague in the United States House of Representatives, Marcia Fudge, who happens to be now the Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development. She was just here like a week ago in Florida. I think she probably understands how dire the situation is in the Sunshine State. I would invite her back upon election and plea with her and the Biden administration, instead of bashing the Biden administration, which this governor does every day, to try to work with them like I worked with President Obama across the aisle to try to help the people of Florida. That's what the governor of Florida should be doing, whether it's groceries or gas or housing or what have you. I mean, I had to pay more for my 1-bedroom apartment in the Bayfront Tower than I did for my 1-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's crazy. And so I think we're already entering a recession, and we have a governor who doesn't care. All he cares about is trying to get in the White House. And it's shameful.
I wanted to follow up on something you said there. You mentioned the Sadowski Fund and it being rated despite the overwhelming affordable housing crisis we have in the state. The raids on the Sadowski Fund started while you were governor. There just wasn't enough money in the budget given the low tax base because of the recession. Now here you are saying that we're about to get into another recession. Are you saying this time in this recession, if you were governor, you'll make sure the Sadowski Fund stays whole?
Yes, precisely. That's what I said.
You think that's possible to do if we enter in a recession similar to the one, back in 2008, 2009?
Jay, it's a must do. It's a must do. You have to adjust to the times and do what's right for the moment. And I know what this moment is. We're in a housing crisis. This is not the time to, raid the Sadowski Fund. We had to do it when I was governor because we wanted to keep teachers in the classroom. We wanted law enforcement to be able to stay on the streets and protect our homes and our communities. We wanted firefighters to be there in case somebody got, their fire, their house caught on fire. I know how to prioritize stuff. I've done this before.
Pardon? Sorry, I thought you were done. I just wanted to reiterate, you're confident that you can do all those things, keep teachers employed, keep firefighters on the streets, all of those things you just mentioned. You can do all that without pulling any money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yeah, I do. Okay. I mean, remember, we were in the Great Recession when I was governor, and much worse than we're looking at right now. I said I think we could be going into one, but if we get a good governor, we might be able to help Florida stave it off a little more than if we have this guy reelected who still doesn't care about us.
I would like to actually follow up on the question about the economy. one of the issues that drew a whole lot at the beginning of the coronavirus was the question of Florida's unemployment system. Well, if that's been fixed, I haven't heard about it. And it could be possibly again become a lifeline for some Floridians if some businesses take a hit as tourism drops. How do you tackle that? Because it's such a tangled mess right now.
Well, I would have a complete review of that agency and its production or lack thereof that we're talking about. And make sure you put people in there that know what they're doing, that can deliver when we're in a crisis and they need that kind of money to be distributed fairly and appropriately. And put competent people in place, like I did when I was governor the first time. For example, I put Bob Butterworth as Secretary of Department of Children and Families because I knew he was a decent, competent, smart public servant. And in all these agencies, you need to have people like that. I mean, we don't even have a Department of Community Affairs anymore. I mean, there's a lot of reviewing of what's going on in this current administration and state government level function that I would undertake during the transition in a very deep dive way, because I think a lot needs to be overhauled, reviewed, and made much, much better and more responsive to the people of our state.
Well, if I could follow up, you mentioned the Department of Community Affairs, which, as you said, was kind of collapsed into the Department of Economic Opportunity, and other departments have gone away. How would you realign some of the departments under the governor's office to kind of bring your priorities forward?
Well, I've touched on a couple already, but look, one of the most important appointments to make will be the Commissioner of Education. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to have somebody there who understands the importance of public education, will become an advocate for appropriate funding for public education throughout the state. I also touched on the Department of Environmental Protection and making sure that the person at the top is a scientist who understands how critical the environment is in Florida instead of it being sort of the forgotten agency. And the same applies to, housing, shift funds, all of these things in state government that have critical roles. They need to be run by competent, intelligent, serious people that can function properly and not have these systems fail all the time. Chris, it's been appalling. This administration's awful. They're awful. They're non-responsive. They're incompetent, and they're off base philosophically with the people of Florida. And what do they say? A fish rots from the head. Well, that's what's happening right now in our state.
If I could circle back to the issue of, the COVID-19 pandemic and the way this governor has handled it.
Yeah.
Or, I think you may have said mishandled it. I mean, what would you do if you prevailed in the primary and won in November? Would you reverse a lot or all of his policies related to COVID, as far as his ban on, preventing schools from requiring masks, to reinstating state vaccination centers, getting testing kits out? I mean, would you reverse his policies and try to make the state more proactive instead of a block to what the mainstream medical community and public health officials said are what Florida should be doing? As you said, we've got 80,000 dead Floridians, which you said the governor is partly responsible for because of his mismanagement of this crisis. And so, what policies would you reverse? And would that include getting rid of the Surgeon General? And what are your thoughts on the Surgeon General and how he got appointed?
He's a quack. Listen, I was raised in a medical family. My father was a family physician in St. Pete for 55 years. My sister is a physician, a radiation oncologist. I respect scientists. I respect science. I believe in it, and I know it's real. And this governor doesn't seem to care about science. And so, yeah, I would appoint a Surgeon General that really takes seriously medicine, instead of, doing whatever he does. That's appalling. And at the outset of when the pandemic hit us, originally for like a month, it seemed like the governor took it seriously. And then I think it started polling badly among his crowd. And he stopped advocating vaccines. He didn't advocate wearing masks in public. When you're indoors at the height of the pandemic, and we had resurgence after resurgence of it, that's pretty inexcusable. And I would not have done it that way. I would have made sure that Floridians were safe, that we were taking good advice, that we had a serious Surgeon General instead of this person we have there now. I would have done it differently. And what would I do when I'm elected? It depends on what's happening with the pandemic at the time, and I will act appropriately and with good advice and serious scientists and healthcare workers to tell me what is the right thing to do and how to, advise Floridians appropriately to get through it much more safely than we did under this guy.
For context, it was you, when you were governor, who created the office of the Surgeon General. Is that, am I, if I remember correctly? Is that right?
I think
you appointed the first Surgeon General. He was the state health director up until then, but would abolishing that office and going back to creating, a state health director be a possible solution?
Forgive me. I think the solution is to have a serious person hold that office.
Okay.
And we don't right now. I think that's the way you fix it.
This morning on the Florida Phoenix, Craig Pittman had a column about a huge proposed development in Lee County that would have been a subject for area of critical state concern back when the state still had that. It would have been a subject for the Department of Community Affairs when the state still had that. What's your position on restoring the regulation of areas of critical state concern and reestablishing the Department of Community Affairs?
I think we need it both. We need both, Martin. I think that there's a void there right now, obviously. They abolished the Department of Community Affairs. I think the service it provided in trying to prevent sprawl throughout the state is critical. So I would do everything I could to get it reestablished because I think we need it, and I think that our environment warrants it. It's essential.
I would like to give you an opportunity to make, say, a 2-minute closing summation, your best case for why you're the best candidate in this Democratic primary for governor.
Yeah, well, thank you first and foremost for your time. I appreciate it very much as well. And I think it's been a great exchange of ideas. And I think what's important is from a Democrat's point of view, we need to win this race in November. I think I have the best opportunity to do it. As I stated, our internal polling that we released recently has me ahead by 21 points. I'm outraising my primary opponent 3-1. I think we're the best candidate to be able to defeat Governor DeSantis in November. And being able to win matters. Having been governor, having been attorney general, having been a commissioner of education, supported by every union in the state, I think is significant. I think we have the best opportunity to get Florida back on track, to restore the sunshine to the Sunshine State, if you will, because it's been dark lately. It really has. And it breaks my heart. It's why I'm running for governor, because I love Florida as much as I do. And I can't sit on the sideline and not get in the game and try to help my fellow Floridians at this moment. I'm asking for your endorsement. That's why I've been on this call for an hour and a half. I need your help. I cannot do this alone. If you want to have a governor like me who cares about you and our fellow Floridians, then endorse me. Please help me do this. And Florida will be a better place for all us to live again. And thank you again for your time.